Welcome to Stress-Free IEP. You do not need to do it all alone. With your host, Frances Shefter, Principal of Shefter Law. You can get more details and catch prior episodes at www.shefterlaw.com. The Stress-Free IEP video podcast is also posted on YouTube and LinkedIn, and you can listen to episodes through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more. Now, here's the host of Stress-Free IEP, Frances Shefter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's guest is Robin Brannon, who is a licensed clinical marriage and family therapist with over 20 years of experience supporting neurodivergent families. Her practice, Better Together Family Therapy, specializes in neurodiversity affirming and LGBTQIA plus affirming therapy. The letters keep going and going on that and changing, which is good. And it's all inclusive. But she also focuses on adults, children, teens, and families. She and her team of seasoned clinicians serve families online throughout Maryland and in person in Kensington, which is nice to know. Find them at betterfamilytherapy.com, which the link will be below, so you don't have to remember how to write it out. And Robin herself is a proud parent of true neurospicy teens. So Robin, I want to jump into the first question because when it comes to marriage or family therapy, how do you know which you need, right?
It's a great question. And I think it's almost always true that if the couple system is not thriving, it's hard for the family to thrive. So oftentimes when there's a question, I would say start with the couple or start with some sort of co-parenting work so that you get the adults on the same page or the parenting adults on the same page, because sometimes we're an all adult family, right? Sometimes we have 18-year-olds or 20-year-olds or 22-year-olds or even 32-year-olds who are coming with us for family therapy. So I would say you want that parent subsystem very strong and on the same page as much as possible going into family therapy.
Right. Which makes sense because everybody says you should do, before couples, you should do individual also, and all of that, right?
Because I'm mind about that. We can talk about that.
Really?
Really.
It's important before the couple?
Oh, I think individual therapy is very important, but I think you have to be extremely careful who you choose as your individual therapist, because sometimes what happens when you go to individual therapy, because you're struggling in your partner relationship or you're struggling in your family relationships, you come in, you talk about how stressful those relationships are for you. Oftentimes, what a therapist does in that situation is start to counsel you out of the relationship. It seems like this relationship is really tough for you. Are you sure you want to be there?
Right.
That happens a lot when you don't have a systemically trained therapist, a therapist who's trained to see families and look at the big picture, look at the whole system. When you do that with individual therapy, sometimes you get advised to leave your relationship. Now, a really great individual therapist should never give you advice. They shouldn't be telling you that. But, you can feel how the therapist feels about it in the series of questions that they're asking. We're people, we're human. So you're going to start to get that impression. My therapist really wants me to leave this relationship.
Right.
So you do have to be careful doing individual when your biggest concern is the couple stuff. When your biggest concern is your ability to stay emotionally regulated in interactions with a partner, how you're handling things in the relationship, then absolutely individual. Or if you have a condition that you're struggling with that makes it difficult for you to be present in a relationship, and that could be anything. That could be you're going through some depression. It could be your ADHD hyperfocus pulls you to something else and you work a whole lot, or you get really excited about the next big project and kind of forget about the thing that's been around for years and years. Right. Those are all normal experiences to have. But if you feel like the struggle is about you and how you're balancing it all, then absolutely individual. Just talk to your therapist about whether they have an understanding of family therapy? How do they look at it when you bring in a complaint about something that's between you and someone else?
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it totally does, because right, why are you in therapy and why are with the relationship? Because as the therapist, I just think about it along the lines of my friends too. Like, what do they hear? They hear us complaining more often because it's not like, we're not going to pay somebody to listen to all the good stuff, And so it's like, but a good therapist will say, like, okay, we see that. But when you look at that, what else is going on, right?
Mhm.
And I know, like, or I know a friend of mine told me once, like when she knew to get divorced, what she started doing was marking on the calendar good days and bad days. And there wound up being more bad days than good days. She realized maybe it's not working anymore.
Sometimes you do have to communicate with yourself over time like that, right? Sometimes people do that in journals, but you need to be able to go back and remember, oh yeah, I did feel this way before.
Right.
And this is happening over and over again. You do lose track of that sometimes. I think as a family therapist working with somebody individually who has family concerns, my greatest focus is going to be getting that individual to a place where they can take what we call in family therapy jargon a differentiated stance in interactions with a partner or a family member, meaning I come into the interaction, I own my feelings and my experience. Like, this is what's going on for me. Here's what I need from you, right? You can express yourself, you can make an ask, and then you don't have any control over what comes back at you. And that's what's so difficult in relationships. That's what's so difficult in parenting, that you don't have actual control over what the other person in the interaction is going to do.
Right.
You
And I know
have to just be ready to stay in that differentiated stance of, I would really like something different.
Right.
Here's what I want. Are you able to do that for me?
Yeah.
Versus
It makes sense.
trying to sort of make it happen.
I'm thinking about all the personal growth seminars I did way back when in the 90s. And I was like, it's getting neutral. It's getting neutral to the, like, I'm okay with whatever the answer is going to be because they need to be in their space.
Right.
And my partner, my husband, my kids, whatever, are going to need to do what they need to do to protect themselves. And that might not be what I think they need to do. And, but it's also communication. That is such the key. Because I know for me, there are many times like, I don't get it. Why hasn't he done X, Y, Z? It's like, well, have you asked him to do X, Y, Z yet? He's not a mind reader, and it's like, ooh, call myself out on it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Just that little bit of owning what you want and asking for it. And we have to do that. We have to do that for things that we're less comfortable talking about too. Right. We have to do those asks in a couple relationship around intimacy and things that you really would rather use the subtle signals for.
Right.
But the reality is we communicate most clearly verbally for the most part. That's how we've evolved as humans. We're in our heads a lot. We use our words both to talk to ourselves and to talk to other people. It presents a real challenge when we have a child with a nonverbal learning difference or whose verbal output doesn't really reflect what they're able to do cognitively, because we do really rely very heavily on verbal communication, right? So our ability to use nonverbals as parents of kids who have IEPs is probably a little bit stronger than the average person's ability to use nonverbals. We're reading between the lines a lot when it comes to our kids.
Yeah. And that's, I'm glad you bring that up. That's something that's always an issue with our nonverbal kids, because they do the cognitive and they do the active, but it's all relies on verbal answers and the communication skills. And if you don't have the communication and you don't have the verbal abilities, we don't know what's going on, and because you're not fitting into the norm of what everybody says, then you're considered intellectually impaired. But do you know that? Like, where do we know? And it's another challenge.
And that's one of the most agonizing things as a parent too, because you don't know. Right? The system doesn't know, but you also don't know for sure. And as parents, especially as parents of kids with particular needs, we're asking ourselves questions all day, every day, right? Are the right supports in place? Are these the right meds? Am I working with the right professionals? Am I missing something that I should be doing? Am I doing something now that would have been better if I did it 2 years ago? We're asking ourselves questions just nonstop because we can always rethink the decisions. There are no clear, easy answers.
Right. And I'm sure you're in the same boat because I have 2 neurodiverse kids also. And it's the same situation, especially in our profession. When you're in a profession dealing with this, like it's, well, wait, I see this kid with that is going this way. Is my kid going to go that way if I don't do, and it just, it makes it so much more difficult because I want to make decisions what's right for my child and her experiences and their choices, not on my fear of what might happen if I don't do this, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's so difficult to stay in the here and now.
Yeah.
Right? To make the next right decision instead of the decision that is going to be right for them 20 years from now.
Right. Right, exactly.
Right? We want to watch the whole movie all the way to the end, but we only have access to the first little bit.
And what I tell clients often when they come to me and it's, they've been fighting this for 2 years and they did this instead. And like, don't beat yourself up because the reality is you made the right decision with the information you had at that point in time. Mm-hmm. Now you know different. And so you're going to make a different decision. But don't beat yourself up for decisions you made then because you didn't know that then. And how would you? Right. And that's a hard parenting thing, as I'm sure you know, because we want the best for our kids and we want the future to be fabulous and them to not struggle in life. But reality check, they're going to struggle no matter what we do. Right.
Yes, absolutely. And, I'll give you a personal anecdote here. I diagnose and treat kids with neurodivergence, all kinds of neurodivergence for a living. My oldest got his autism diagnosis at 17.
Mine got hers at 10.
Right? And sometimes when we're so good at accommodating at home, we don't catch it until much later because we've picked the right school and we've, just built a context that works for this child, which ultimately is where you're trying to go with it. Right.
Right.
But, he ended up with an autism diagnosis because we went to see How to Dance in Ohio, which is a musical with an all autistic cast focused on the experience of trying to attend a school dance as an autistic young adult.
I need to see that one.
And so we went to see it. And I will say that was a deliberate parenting choice on my part that we went to go see it. But, my son turned to me at intermission and said, "Mom, I'm autistic."
Wow.
Okay.
To be that self-aware.
Yeah. And we already had the reevaluation scheduled because, as all of you know, you have to redo it past the age of 16. Right. So we already had that reeval on the calendar and we just made sure that they included the autism piece, which you do have to do. If you're earlier on in the process right now and haven't hit that point yet, you do have to ask explicitly to test for what you want to test for. Executive function measures will not always be included. Measures of autism will not always be included.
Right. And it's so hard, I know, because I don't want to, some parents are like, well, I don't want to tell the psychologist what to look for. And that's not what it is with assessments. It's saying this is what's suspected. And a good psychologist doing the assessments will either agree or rule it out. And that's what you want,
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially since with autism, ADHD, and anxiety, like the 3 of them are so overlapping with so many symptoms and stuff. And it's rare to have one without at least one of the others, if not all 3, because how do you, which is it, and it's hard to pull that out. And so if you're suspecting one or the other, you need to let the psychologist know where to dig a little deeper.
Yes, right? Absolutely. It's like when you go to the doctor because you're not feeling well and they ask you questions about what you've noticed about how you're feeling. And then they make a decision. Are they going to test you for flu? Are they going to test you for COVID? Are they going to test you for something else? Right? It's the same process.
Right. Exactly. And we're to look into it. So what, parents struggle, like as we're talking about as parents, like we always question
Mhm.
ourselves, no matter how much we try not to. We always go back and question ourselves. What are some of the things that parents can do to help support themselves when on this battle fighting for their children or advocating for their children?
I cannot emphasize enough how important this piece is. And we're all guilty of it, myself included. Our child's needs and our child's journey are really compelling. And we've done a lot of research and we've learned a lot. And we're really trying to optimize to the extent that we can our child's experience in this world. Right. And we completely forget to optimize our experience in that process. And there is give and take there. You do have to do a little bit less on the parenting side to do a little bit more self-care, but ultimately that is in the end more effective parenting because you are more grounded, you're less likely to lose your temper, you are more in that differentiated stance where you have your own experience and your child's experience is something separate. And you can look at how the two interact without sort of blending your child's experience with your own, without feeling all of their feelings. Right.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do, which is why it takes work. Right?
Exactly.
That's why it takes work. So we did a fun little thing on our website and put up a one-pager called the Parent IEP.
Okay.
That has some tips for parents on it. So you can follow the link that's in the notes or betterfamilytherapy.com/blog. And today it should be right at the top of the blog. It will creep its way down as time goes on. So if you're looking at this later, you might have to scroll a little bit to get to it. But that one pager is just a quick tip sheet that will tell you some ideas about how to give yourself extended time, how to give yourself reduced workload, one-to-one support, preferential seating.
Oh my gosh, like amazing, right?
But we need it. We need it.
And you don't think
know our
about
kids need these things, right? But we don't always remember that we need them. We know we need them. We can feel it. We can feel it up here when we start to struggle. Like we know we need them, but we don't make the time. We see it over and over again in our practice that parents will come in excited to do some self-care. They'll do a couple sessions for themselves, and then they'll say, "Can you see my child?" Or we'll get it even more clearly than that on the phone in the initial phone call. Well, I can do out of network for my kid, but not for me.
Yep.
We hear that all the time. I need an in-network provider for myself, but I'm going to find the best provider, whatever it costs for my child.
Right.
Right.
Which is true.
And we do. Yeah. We need to divide those resources a little bit. We need to give some back to ourselves so that we can be there in the long run for our child. Right. When we're looking at things like reduced workload, it's looking at what needs to change in your life in order to be able to support your child at the level that you really need to. Right. You'd like to support your child indefinitely. That's not possible. So it's defining the amount of support that's really necessary in the moment. And that's a really tricky thing to do. And then looking at realistically, what else has to give? What might need to be outsourced? What might you have to say no to? Right? You know, maybe you really want that role on the PTA because you want the inside scoop. You want to know all the people so that when you need something for your child, you can ask. Right? You might have to, we're very strategic as parents. We do that for sure. We want them to know who we are when we need something. But you may need to turn down that leadership role in the PTA in order to be really present in the hours that your child needs you and just you for something, or in order to be really present for yourself. Right? Maybe you need that hour to go to therapy. You need that hour for a massage. You need that hour for a manicure. You need that hour for a walk rather than, you know, creating a flyer for the next PTA event or whatever you'd be doing in that moment.
Which makes total sense. I don't know why we're getting an echo. Do you hear the echo also?
I don't hear
Uh,
the echo.
Oh, okay. Then maybe everybody else doesn't either. Actually, I think it just stopped. But like it makes sense. I mean, like you think about when you fly, what do they say? Put your air mask on first before you put your child's air mask on, and then your husband's air mask, and you might need the help also, right? Um, but you know, it's we got to take care of ourselves. And as moms, you know, and dads too, sometimes they don't. We don't. We put our kids first. We don't you know, like you said, like their needs are ahead of our needs because of X, Y, Z, every other reason in the book. But
Mhm.
it's, you know, that's something I know I've been working on a lot with the, you know, the needs of my child, the needs of me, the needs of my marriage, the needs of the marriage, you know, the family as a whole. Like,
Mhm.
where do we find that balance, and um, what do we focus on? And it was interesting. In one of the parent support groups that I was in the other last week, one of the moms had said is that she starts focusing on one thing at a time because we want to teach our children so much. You know, we want to teach them empathy, we want to teach them executive functioning and self-control and how to give back to the community and all this other stuff. We want to teach the whole child. But when we have our children that are neurodiverse, sometimes you need to break it down and just teach one at a time,
Mhm.
right?
And it's about defining what needs to be learned right now and what can still be learned later.
Yeah.
Right? We
Yeah.
often look at our kids' workloads and make those distinctions. Like, well, these are the assignments we're absolutely going to have to do, and these are the ones that are going to have to wait until we have time. That's when we use our extended time.
Yep.
And we need to give ourselves extended time as parents. What are the tasks that need to happen now versus we can let that develop later? And sometimes the tasks that we sign up for now for later end up not being needed in the long run because your child develops in unpredictable ways. A skill is going to pop up in them that you did not expect
Right.
without necessarily intervening in it now. And so giving them some time to develop is also an intervention, right?
Which,
That is a strategy.
yeah, you say that. And I say all the time right now that my children's mental health is the most important thing right now.
Mhm.
You know, academics and all that other stuff, it'll come later. But my children's mental health is if you don't have good mental health, the academics don't matter. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like if you're not taking
They're
care of
not
yourself.
sustainable.
Right, exactly. And
Yeah.
so, you know, there are times like, you know, I get phone calls of like your child hasn't done their math homework. I'm like, okay, I'll see what I can do about that. Guess what? She probably won't do her math homework.
Mhm.
She's excelling in math and doing well, and she needs that downtime at home. You know, she has her physical therapy, she has Hebrew school, she has knitting, she's loving learning how to knit. She has all this other stuff. I'm sorry, I'm not taking another 45 minutes out of her day to go back and reinforce math because she, you know, like right now, she needs that other time. She says to me often, Mom, there's too much. I don't have any time for myself.
Mhm.
And then I look at her plate and I understand it's full and I understand there's a lot. And then what is it that I can take off that is going that doesn't matter right now?
Notice how
You know what I
quickly
mean?
you did that on behalf of your child.
Right?
Right? You immediately
Right.
saw that as an issue that needed to be
Exactly.
resolved for your
Yep.
child. And it was like, okay, we're going to take something off her plate.
Right.
And
Do
we
I do
don't
it
do
for
that for
myself?
ourselves.
I actually did recently though. There was a time, there was something I had like at the same time, a couple of different organizations asked me to be on their board, like at the same time. And I actually said no. Um, which I don't usually do, but it was just like I can't my bandwidth right now, I just can't take on one more thing. Um, so
Yeah.
I'm getting better. But
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
hard.
It is hard.
Mhm.
The no isn't always a joyful no,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because these are things that you as a person may really want to do.
Yeah.
And the reality is they don't all fit together. There's some grieving there to do for the life that you would like to have if something was different. And not necessarily if your child was different, just
Right.
if the demands of your job were different. all kinds of different things create these trade-offs for us.
Right.
But it's okay to grieve a little the thing that you can't do. You can't live everywhere. You
Right.
can't live where you live now and also live in Hawaii. It's okay to be sad that you don't live in Hawaii.
Right. I miss Florida. I lived there.
But I mean, wouldn't it be great if we had indefinite time and we could live everywhere and we could do
Right.
we could do anything? We
Yeah.
can't. We make hard choices. We give things up. We sit out on things that we would really like to be doing in
Yeah.
service of something else. But it's about taking all of those tasks, like you looked at your daughter's math homework and her knitting and her downtime and all the other things that she needed to do, and decided what needed to go. Right?
Yeah.
What are the real priorities here? And I think sometimes our kids are most frustrated with the fact that school doesn't do that.
Yeah.
Right? There is a volume of work that just is what it is.
Yeah.
And there's nobody saying, well, you know what? You're already really good at this. I don't think you need this extra practice.
Yeah.
It's just not individualized to that level. And
Right.
it's very frustrating for our kids because they're doing a lot of non-preferred tasks that don't serve them.
Yep.
That's true for all kids, but it's especially frustrating for our kids who really have to mobilize a lot of emotional resources to do a non-preferred task in the first place.
Yeah. I had, I'll go on a personal story too. My daughter, she didn't finish assignment at school, and so we're doing it over the weekend. And she always says she wants me to help her because I get her. And, I have the special ed background and teaching background and stuff. But so we were working on the project and we would take our breaks when we needed. And she's like, Mom, I don't get it. I've done all the research. I have all the information and can do the slides. Why do I have to write the paper? And I'm like, really good question. Because that's the assignment, and I'm thinking to myself, like, this is just baloney. I mean, I get it, but what is the assignment here? Like, what are we looking at in grading? And this goes back to like IEPs and stuff like that. And when you're looking at goals and supplementary aids, what is the goal here? What are you trying to grade? Is it that she can do the research and support her findings? Or is it that she can write a paper? Because if she can do the research and support her findings, then let her do the slide. She doesn't need to write the paper. If she can write, if the goal is the writing of the paper and being able to put it on paper, okay, that's fine. But we need to define that. Which is it? And let's be specific. And that goes down to specific goals on IEPs, right?
It really does.
If
you're lucky enough to have the IEP, right?
Well, yeah.
We don't all achieve that. If you're lucky enough to have the IEP, that's a great place to go for focused goals, right? We have really defined on paper for that child what we are trying to accomplish.
Yep. Yeah.
And tying things to the IEP is a great strategy. It's like, okay, if you were evaluating on the IEP for the IEP meeting, if you were evaluating, has this child met this goal? Is what she does on this paper part of your assessment? Or do you already know your answer?
Right. Yeah. And it's so true. And it's things like, unfortunately, our school system, even in the general ed and our kids that don't have IEPs, it's not clearly defined. Like, we have the curriculum you need to do, and you have to do this and you have to do that. And my biggest battle right now with my child is to show the work in math. And she's like, but I got the right answer. Why do I need to show the work? I'm like, yeah. And I understand that the teacher brain in me understands that you need to show every step, but the mom brain in me and the brain in me that has talked to like mathematicians, they're like, yeah, when I was a kid, I couldn't show the work either. I knew how to do it. I didn't know how to break it down and show you how to do it. Some brains don't work that way. And then again, but that's our school system says you're going to get off if you don't show the work. You're going to get points deducted. Where's the balance? And how does that mess with, that brings me into wrapping it around to therapy and stuff, is that the kid's self-esteem, because now they've got a 50%, even though they got all the answers right. What are we now teaching our children on the mental health side of, like, you can do everything right and still only get 50%, right?
Right. Do they really have a low frustration tolerance, or are we serving them extra frustration?
Exactly. Like, who's at fault
And both
here?
can be true, right?
Right. And
But
it's
yeah,
just
absolutely, it does. I mean, there are philosophical questions here about when something is a clinical issue and when it's a product of the environment, right?
Yeah.
Technically, something is not a clinically diagnosable issue if it's an understandable result of the context that the person is in. We can chase our tail for hours on that one when it comes to neurodivergent kids,
Right.
Because the environment wasn't set up for them in the first place. So that's going to generate some of the anxiety that we see. Right? If you know your way isn't going to be the right way over and over and over and over again, then of course you're going to be anxious.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to be afraid to give the answer because your answer is clever and creative in a way that wasn't anticipated and isn't in the list of possibilities.
Right. Exactly. No, it makes sense. And that's part of the problem with today's school systems, is that it's not, no matter how individualized we get our IEPs and how perfect they are, and how it's the reality check of, we've got, 25 kids in a classroom. If you're lucky, only 25 kids in a classroom, and how many of them have IEPs, and what's the support they can really do, and can the teachers really do all of this? And the teachers are being hounded with, you have to do this and you have to do that, and your kids have to, do this on their tests and all that other stuff. And it's, when does it matter about the child, And that's why I always say my child's mental health is more important than all the other stuff right now. I want my kids to grow up to be strong, independent, self-confident girls. And that's my focus. The school will come. I'm not worried about them intellectually, like, okay, so if it takes them a little bit longer to learn how to do whatever, okay, that's fine. But that as long as they're keeping their self-confidence while learning it.
I think that's so easy for us to say.
I know.
People with backgrounds in the helping professions, we could just nod along with each other, all day long on this. And we can keep thinking about it and talking about it all day long, which eats into our self-care.
Right? Yeah.
This is interesting stuff. And it's something that we're passionate about, because we're never more passionate about anything than we are about something that affects our kids.
Yeah.
That ignites the fire in us like nothing else. And so we can have fun having this conversation all day, and then not get to the things that we need in order to really refill our cup, re-energize ourselves. Sometimes when I'm working with families, we talk about thrillers, chillers, and fillers. The thrillers are the things that kind of wake your brain up, give you energy, give you focus, get you back into flow on things. Your chillers are things that calm you down when you're a little too anxious, a little too agitated, a little too all over the place. And your fillers are things that you like to do that don't really do either of those things. And we need space for all three of them. We try to do them in the quick little ways, right? Like we use our coffee as our thriller.
Right.
Which
is a whole nother thing. Is it really helping?
Depends on the situation. But we need space for those things for ourselves in order to stay regulated throughout the day and stay grounded and be able to make good decisions about what needs to happen right now and what needs to wait till later. And then be able to stand behind those decisions in the face of some challenging circumstances sometimes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's, I say it all the time, even if it's 10, 15 minutes a day as a parent of just taking to yourself, whatever that is, it's like, build it in, make the time. So many people are like, oh, I wish I had time to go get a massage. I wish I had time to go get my nails done. I wish I had time to get my hair done, whatever it is. I wish. Okay. So if you don't have that time, give yourself 10 minutes. If you're a coffee drinker, sit outside by yourself for 10 minutes with headphones on so you can't hear anything else, and have your coffee, if that's what works for you, or go for the walk, or, whatever it is. But I'm thinking about me and like what works for me and my things. And I think about, well, reading does. Okay. But when I'm reading, it shouldn't be reading about neurodiverse children, about work or those type of things. Right. I need to go find my trashy novels that I used to read and that to give that brain break, and make sure that
Yeah.
it's truly something I'm doing for me.
Right. And is that book in your bag or is your laptop in your bag?
Yeah, my Kindle's back at home sitting right.
Yeah.
Although I do have it on my phone. So, but yeah, I mean, but
right. But waiting rooms, this is the preferential seating part of the parent IEP. Waiting rooms are a great place for self-care.
yeah,
Bring your favorite blanket, bring a book, bring music that delights you. We really try to make our waiting rooms as mental health professionals comfortable places to be. Sometimes
yeah,
we offer tea or coffee or water, or we try to manage the lighting. We do all kinds of things to try to make it a really comfortable place to be. But as parents, it's hard to get out of go mode. And sometimes
yeah,
we're like, oh, this is my time to reschedule that appointment. I'll make those phone calls. I'll check on some things on my phone. I'll answer my email. We just
yeah,
stay in go mode. But really, we have that chunk of time when our child is in an appointment to use as we see fit.
yeah,
It's a really
yeah,
nice opportunity to just give to yourself and do nothing else in that time.
yeah. I'm hearing you. I'm like, okay, I know what I need to do. Yeah.
It goes in the ears,
It is. I
and
know. But
eventually it settles in the
it
heart.
makes sense. And I think about it and I'm like, I love reading. I used to read all the time. I love reading. And you know what? My Kindle should be in my purse all the time. Instead of me checking my emails or playing solitaire or something, I should be reading, taking those 10 minutes to read or whatever it is, and really enjoy it.
Yeah,
It's
and what
funny,
unexpected thing might happen if your child saw you joyfully reading all the time?
I know, right?
Mhm.
Amazing. They
You
might
never
actually
know.
start
They might
liking
get
it.
excited about it.
Right. No, it's true. My daughter keeps asking for a Kindle, and I'm like, you know what? I really probably should just get her one because if she's showing that much interest in reading, then maybe she will. But I don't know. We'll see. But it's like I think about how like my coach, I was trying to say, my business coach, made us take our work email off of our phones, and that was such an amazing difference because like as a business owner, as an attorney that clients always have needs and stuff, like I'm on my phone all the time checking my email. But the
Mhm.
reality is there something on my email right now that can't wait 12 hours? Probably not. And
Yes.
reading the email now at 10 o'clock at night, right before going to bed, guess what? I'm not sleeping well because all night I'm thinking about, oh my gosh,
Mhm.
how do I have to respond to this? What do I need to do to make it better? How do I fix it? And stuff like that. And then it's just that spiral effect that I'm not helping anybody,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. I'm a big fan of having an appointment time for your email.
Yeah.
Look at it at a specified time that you have chosen,
Yep. Which goes
right?
back to my block schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, anything that's an emergency, a true emergency, they can make your phone ring for that,
Yeah.
right? And they
Exactly.
will.
And I've found more often than not, the true emergencies, if they get ignored for an hour, all of a sudden people are able to figure it out, you know,
Yes,
which is empowering in itself of the person that had the true emergency being able to solve the emergency on their own. Um, but it's, yeah. And it's interesting you say that because it's not only the things we do for ourselves in the self-care, but it's the things we don't do. Do you know what I mean? Like making that 10 minutes for yourself to read or whatever it is, is the self-care, but it's also not checking email. That's self-care,
mhm,
right? And it's little things like that that people don't realize that those are just as important as the making their own time for yourself, right?
absolutely. And I think we have a big moment coming up with election day where the temptation is going to be strong to monitor information sources all day long.
Yep.
And we are going to layer stress upon stress upon stress upon stress
Yep.
because we cannot affect the outcome in that moment, all we can do is check and check and check and anticipate the best,
Right.
anticipate the worst. But that's a great moment to put your phone down and say, I'm going to learn the election results at 10 p.m. or whatever it
Or
is.
tomorrow morning when I wake up.
Or tomorrow
Right?
morning. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whatever
Yeah,
time
no, that
works
makes
for
sense.
you. We forget sometimes that these things can be turned off because
Yeah.
they're so ubiquitous. We have them everywhere.
Yeah.
But they
Yeah.
can be turned off. I'm a big fan of treating my phone like it's a landline. When I'm at home, it is plugged in and it is somewhere other than where I am. Now, my kids don't love that when they try to text me something,
Yeah.
right? But they
That's
know
the
if you're
challenge.
texting me and you don't hear back, you're going to have to make my phone ring so I know you want my attention.
Yeah. Which makes sense. But it's
Yep.
again that battle of, well, but I need it for this reason and not for that reason. So how do you turn it off for one and not the other? But
Yes. And some of us, we definitely need to be on call for our kids in some way. So there has to be a way of reaching you, whatever that is. If you work in a physical location, sometimes that's just having people know who else they can call in your office if something truly is an emergency and you need to be interrupted.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
We don't all have jobs where we can plug the phone in and walk away. Some of us truly are on call for things. And in that case, you need to kind of do the reverse where you're planning a specific moment that you do put it down. You put it down for half an hour or you put it down for whatever break time is allowable for you. And if you are on call all day, every day, and there aren't long chunks of break time, that might be an opportunity to think about your work life and what might have to give in order for you to be available. In most cases, when we have a child with particular learning needs, we've already made those adjustments in our life, right? We've already grieved the career achievement that we were aiming for that isn't possible with the life that we need to live now.
Right.
Right. But if you haven't, we're really good at developing superpowers as needed and just like expanding ourselves infinitely until we crash. Right.
But it's again,
expanding ourselves infinitely to meet the challenge. But
but it's
if you're trying to do that, if you're being a superstar at work and trying to be a superstar parent at home, eventually something's got to give, and it's probably going to be your health.
Yeah.
And so you do really need to make some careful decisions. And sometimes the hardest part of those is having a conversation with your parenting partner.
Yeah.
About why it is so important for you to be present in the way that you're trying to be present. And even if your parenting partner doesn't agree, right? Maybe your parenting partner doesn't agree that your child needs particular accommodations or doesn't agree that this is best. You can always come back to, this is really important to me. Will you support me in this way? Right? That it's ultimately about caring for you as a parenting partner. And one of my ground rules for couples is often, if one of you cares deeply about it, that person decides. Right? There are going to be things that really, really matter to one of you.
Yeah.
And that's the moment that you yield and you give to your partner. And then, if you have things that really matter for both of you, that's when you involve a third person. And
I was going to say, that's what we call you, right?
How you make those micro concessions.
Yeah, to make, because that's parenting is about compromise and co-parenting, whether you're together with your, co-parenting or not together, whatever it is, it's all trying to figure out. And everybody always says, but as long as it's focused on the child, well, it needs to be focused on the child, but it needs to also be a little bit focused on you as a parent in the sense of what works. But it's, I know you said earlier about the grieving thing about as parents grieving a little bit that our child's not going to be what we thought they were going to be. And it's that,
or that we're not going to be what we thought we were going to be.
Yeah, that too.
We leave that part out.
Yeah. And just that we need to let go of our dreams for our child and focus on our child's dreams for themselves. You know, like we lived our life. We're not supposed to live vicariously now through our children's lives, you know? Yes, give them more and you know, we look back at our pasts and how we grew up, and my husband and I grew up a lot of similarities but a lot of differences. So like which is better, which is worse, and how do we find that compromise of like we both turned out okay, we're both successful people, you know, but what do we want for our children, and how do we find that, which again is when you bring a third party in, you're
Yeah,
not doing it well, you know.
absolutely. And sometimes that just takes finding the values behind the values. Like if you're
Yeah.
from a family that really emphasizes education and there's a lot of pride in having gone to an Ivy, or there's just a lot of emphasis on a very high level of academic success, behind that is a value placed on intelligence and a value placed on hard work, right? And
Right.
you may not have a child that's going to go to that Ivy, but you
Right.
may have a child that is more hardworking than most of the kids that do go to that Ivy because they're working so much harder to get where they're going. Right. And so
Yeah.
it's, figuring out what the values behind the values are. When there's something on paper, like a particular degree that we value really highly, it's because that's a symbol of something.
Right. That makes sense. I hadn't even thought of it that way, but it's true. Like it's just what is most important, right? Mental health. I know for me that is like it is because it like
It
for
is.
my I think when my daughter's like I just can't make it to school today. I need a mental health day. I'm like okay, we'll make it work. We'll figure it out because
Mhm.
like to me, what's going to happen if I send her to school? Is that day going to be a good day at school? Am I going to wind up getting a call in 2 hours anyway because something else happened? Is she going to be available for learning? Like what, like she doesn't abuse it. This is a kid that loves going to school. So
Right.
that's the other thing. Like when she actually says she needs a mental day, I'm like, okay, because this is a kid that she had 102 fever and was crying because I wouldn't let her go to school.
Oh my gosh.
Right. Like so for her asking for a mental health day, okay. Like her knowing
Absolutely.
but that's
Yeah.
showing our kids and being able to and knowing that I can give, what do I give up for my child? But that goes into it also. Like, what's my priority here? If her mental health
Mhm.
is my priority, then whatever else I'm doing needs to take a back seat for the day for her mental health, if that's what's needed.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And we
Yeah.
don't do that for ourselves so easily either.
Nope. I mean,
I'm
I
not
remember
giving
when
us
I
a
was
lot of credit for our self-care as parents here today.
I,
We
as a
work really
teacher, but
hard to create some self-care in our lives, for
yeah,
sure. We
I was just
absolutely
saying,
do. But we can
as a
still do
teacher, yeah, as a teacher, I used to take mental health days a lot. I would go to, I taught in Florida, so I'd go to the beach. Like it's too beautiful of a day to be stuck inside. I, call in sick. But as a parent, it's harder because you have more, and especially business owner, it's not like if I don't work, the work doesn't get done,
better.
but finding that time that I can turn it off, you know, so
Yeah.
it's so
That's
important.
another area of life where it feels like if I don't do it, no one will.
And
That
so
comes up
what?
a lot for us as parents. If I don't do it, no one will.
Yeah.
Okay. And what if no one does?
Yeah.
Then what will happen? And what will be
Right.
our next choice to make after that?
Yeah.
Right?
It will sit
We
out.
make a whole series of decisions, and then we make subsequent decisions to address whatever mistakes we made in the previous decisions.
Right.
There's always another decision coming. It's
No.
not the be all end all. It's not the end of the movie.
Yeah.
When you make the choice that you're making today, you get to make another choice tomorrow, and the day after
Yep.
that, and the day after that.
And if you need to switch directions, there's nothing wrong with that, and it's giving ourselves that grace to be able
Yeah.
to make that, it's okay. You're going to make a mistake. And guess what? We're all human and we'll figure it out next time. Right.
Yeah. And it's really believing
Better.
that, right?
Yeah.
It takes a lot of repetition in your head to really believe that in your heart.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. So I just noticed the time and I'm like, oh, oops, it's already almost 1:00. This has been so awesome. Thank you so much, Robin, for being on the show. This has been like, I always say it on the personal level also, and I hope my listeners are learning, takeaways for me is take time for you. Make sure you take time for you before for them. And then, if your marriage is having an issue, call someone, start there. Right.
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes that involves making that ask to your partner of, this is really important to me. Are you willing to do this for me?
Yeah.
Because you may not have the same values about therapy. You may not see it the same way. And at the end of the day, you do it for each other when you're doing couples therapy.
Yeah, that is true. That's important to know. So thank you so much. And I know we're going to have all the links. And I know you said about the IEP for parents. We'll put that link in when this gets published fully also. We'll make sure we have that link also so people don't have to go search for it. But everything you mentioned. But thank you so much for being here and sharing all of your wisdom with us.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
You've been listening to Stress Free IEP with your host, Frances Shefter. Remember, you do not need to do it all alone. You can reach Frances through shefterlaw.com, where prior episodes are also posted. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, and sharing the show with others through YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and more.